My name is Andy Schmuckler. I sometimes call myself a man on a mission. Part of that mission is to try to illuminate the nature of the crisis we have in America in these times, when American democracy and its basic institutions are under serious threat from a force of fascism. Now, the big news of recent days, of course, has been the verdict in Donald Trump's New York City trial, where he's been found guilty by a jury of his peers, unanimously convinced by the evidence that he's committed those 34 felony counts for which he had been indicted and now tried. That is a big story. I mean, it shouldn't be as big a story as it is, but with various regrettable factors resulting in the fact that in the 4 jurisdictions in which Trump has been indicted, a total of 88 counts, only this one is actually going to be conducted before the American people have to go to the polls and choose which of 2 men they want to have be president for the next 4 years. So it's also important because the American people have, if their eyes are open, have witnessed an extraordinary accomplishment by Donald Trump of being able to do a whole lot of things and always escape the consequences that the system is designed to impose on people who do some of those things. I mean, I thought that the first impeachment came rather late. I thought it was visible in 2017 that impeachment was necessary. I was, as a former candidate for Congress in this area, whose opponent, who beat him, because this is a very Republican area, was chair of the House Judiciary Committee. I created a couple of big press events on the doorstep of Bob Goodlatte's Harrisonburg office to say he should do his job and look into whether this president is committing high crimes and misdemeanors. So he survived that impeachment because the Republican Party, except for Mitt Romney in the first impeachment, there were 7 Republicans who voted to convict in the Senate with the second one after he incited this insurrection. But the Republicans saved his bacon there. The Mueller report that I had thought was going to take care of getting the American people to reject criminality in the Oval Office, I have never understood what exactly happened with the, Robert Mueller did not prove to be the hero I anticipated, and I've never understood just what happened. Wish I could ask Andrew Weissman, who was one of his primary deputies, what happened with this guy that we heard about when he was appointed. But anyway, and Donald Trump, it's been clear he's been skating on the edge of being held accountable even before he entered politics, but and after, and get the way he channeled foreign governments to give him money through his hotel while he was president in violation of the emoluments clause. I don't get me started. I mean, this is just very concerning for somebody who believes in America that we've always advertised that we are. It's just a really big deal. And here, a big story this week. Donald Trump has been held accountable. Now, it's not the first time that the rule of law is found for Trump, but this I found against Trump. I mean, there's a E. Jean Carroll thing, as I'll say in a few minutes. But the other thing that is a really big story is that the Republican Party, in the wake of this verdict, has shown us again what this once respectable party has become in our times. Because right after the verdict, I mean, there was all the way the big Republicans from Congress went up to New York to basically attack the trial, even before there was a verdict. And then after there's a verdict, we've got a bunch of Republicans, including the number one Republican, most powerful Republican right now, the Speaker of the House, second in line for the presidency, Mike Johnson. He went up there and he talked about this verdict on Donald Trump as a shameful day in American history. This is a purely political exercise, not a legal one. The weaponization of our justice system has been a hallmark of the Biden. And this is sort of typical of, there was a whole chorus on the media, then doing press events and denouncing this sham and this witch hunt and this politicization of the American justice system by the Biden administration to attack a political opponent. In some ways, I think that this story is even bigger than the other. And I hope that the Democrats and others who believe in the American rule of law will rally more vigorously than they have so far to go after all this. I didn't like that the first night it seemed as though the Republicans were allowed to attack the rule of law in this way and have their words stand out there without an immediate vigorous counterattack. But anyway, I have a platform of small platform, but my mom taught me that there's no such thing as small parts. There's just small actors. I guess that's a theater concept. And I've always, and I've watched her when she was given small parts, do everything she could to play the part meaningfully. And I've got every week I get an op-ed piece in newspapers in the district in which I ran for Congress 12 years ago. And I do what I can with the 2-to-1 Republican population of these newspapers areas, or even 70% in the case of the area where I live directly and have a weekly op-ed. So I've been working on an op-ed piece, and this is a work in progress, but this is the time to also use this platform for whoever it may reach. I wish it reached as many people as the op-ed pieces, but in any event, this is an incomplete draft of an op-ed piece that I want to get out there as quickly as I can, because we need to counterattack here. We can't let our fellow citizens be misled by a political party that has gotten to the point where when its leader has been committing crimes and has been attacking the American system of justice in wanton ways, they side with him. So the title at the moment for this piece is "Just Look at the Damned Evidence!" exclamation point. I don't know if that's what I will publish this under. In the op-ed form of this, I feel like I need to give it a title that won't prevent my Republican readers, whatever number of them I may have, from me looking even at the article. So I don't call it, as I call this video, uh, uh, something about the Republicans show us again what they've become. So this op-ed has two parts. And the first one is fully draft. The second one I've just begun. The first part is called A Disgraceful Attack on the Rule of Law. It should be obvious to every American who gives the evidence the least bit of thought that the way many Republican leaders responded to Trump's conviction was an outright attack on the rule of law. Sham? Witch hunt? Politically motivated? All the evidence points the other way. Those who don't like the idea that Donald Trump should be subject to the law are entitled to their feelings, but no one should believe lies so obviously contrary to the facts. Even aside from the scrupulously conducted trial, where a jury of average Americans listened to weeks of testimony and concluded unanimously that Trump was guilty as charged, this is but the latest piece in a growing pattern of properly arrived at legal findings of Trump's wrongdoing. And then I've got an imperfect and not necessarily complete set of bullet points. A court in Colorado looked deeply into Trump's role in the insurrection and determined that he was indeed an insurrectionist. A grand jury in Georgia found that Trump and others were guilty of conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia. A jury of average Americans in New York found that Trump was guilty of sexually assaulting and then defaming a woman, E. Jean Carroll, and they penalized Trump for it in a civil case. A legal proceeding found that Trump's organization had been guilty of widespread financial fraud and imposed a penalty in the hundreds of millions of dollars. A judge in California said it was more than probable that Trump was guilty of crimes related to the attempt to overturn the 2020 election. And then I've got space for maybe a couple of other things that weren't coming to my mind when I was writing this. Add to all that how Trump has done everything he could to delay every trial, to prevent those trials in all the jurisdictions in which he had been indicted from occurring before the election. If he were innocent, would he not be eager to show his innocence to the people before the election? Add to that how the talking indictments in all these other cases in Georgia and the two federal cases present such strong evidence of Trump's guilt, especially the case in Florida, widely considered an utter slam dunk for conviction on the charges regarding Trump's endangering national security with his theft and mishandling of classified documents. There's absolutely no reason to expect juries in the other cases would be less likely to convict than the jury in this Manhattan case. Against all those reasons for trusting the justice of Trump's being found guilty of those 34 felonies, there's not a bit of evidence to support the Republican leader's scandalous pretense that some injustice has been done to Trump by that trial. I would prefer it if the Republicans just openly declared that they'd rather support criminal Trump than the American system of justice. But there's no honest way to fail to see that those Republican leaders are joining Trump in waging war against the rule of law. And what should an American think of a party, from its chosen Speaker of the House on down, that rallies to support the man with such a trail of criminality by attacking the American system of justice that has functioned exactly as it is supposed to do. Well, function in terms of the ways Trump's been held accountable, but not function as it's supposed to do the way the Supreme Court has made itself an accomplice by completely unnecessarily delaying a trial that should have started in January. And then what's happening in Florida, where another single federal judge has behaved in this such a scandalous way. It's hard for me to believe that the rule of law is not more powerful to deal with something like the judge Eileen Cannon down in Florida. I mean, people keep on talking about, well, if she does this, then he can go to the 11th Circuit and they will reverse her as they did, very scathingly back twice before. But, he has to wait for her to do something of a particular sort. Everybody can see what she's up to. I also am somewhat scandalized by how much people say, well, maybe it's just incompetence. I mean, is there really room for a reasonable doubt about whether Judge Cannon is basically behaving in a corrupt, biased way? I mean, it's not as though we haven't seen that there are problems of judges being corrupted. We've seen what Alito has done with his refusal to recuse and the flying of these flags, and we've seen Justice Thomas with his being lifted up to this, being able to live the life of the super rich by the billionaire class, and then consistently ruling in their favor. That's another piece of the picture of which this other thing is part. That has the Republican Speaker of the House and many of his colleagues going up to New York to talk about, oh gosh, what was that quote? The weaponization of the justice system under Biden, rather than what is completely obvious, that actually the Biden Department of Justice bent over backwards to avoid a confrontation with Trump. It delayed disastrously, as it turns out, for almost 2 years, investigating what everybody could see from the beginning needed to be investigated, having to do with the insurrection. Even Mitch McConnell recognized, in the immediate aftermath of that attempt to overthrow the constitutional order on January 6th, that Trump was eligible to be prosecuted for his being morally and practically and principally responsible for that whole thing. But the Biden Department of Justice was eager to avoid that confrontation. You can see that also with the documents case. I mean, if you look at the whole timeline of the all the year plus that went by when they were treating him with kid gloves, trying to do everything possible to allow Trump to just undo his some criminal acts that he had done by giving the documents back, where ultimately they had to go to a judge and get a warrant, not for a raid, but for a legitimate search. And of course, the Trump and his Republican colleagues have misrepresented everything about that. We need to see that the Republican Party has become a willing adjunct to a leader that has been waging a war against the rule of law, both in the commission of crimes, which has been I think probably you could say a lifelong pattern of his, and also now that the system of justice is trying to hold him accountable, uh, attacking it in every way that's available, showing a lot of resourcefulness about it. The intimidation thing, the wielding of the potential of political violence. I mean, it's really quite. Just look at the damned evidence. I want to say to the Republican base among whom I live here in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. And then there's going to be a second part of this op-ed having to do with the sentencing issue that's coming up. It's really a separate point. I mean, the big point is that one of America's two major political parties is no longer committed to America's basic form of government, which is fundamental to which is the rule of law. Given a choice between Trump and the rule of law, this Republican Party, with few exceptions, will support Trump. And that is indicative of the heart of a huge historical crossroads that we're coming to, which I represent as a conflict between two forms of government, one democratic that we were founded with our Constitution, and one essentially fascistic, where power is wielded in whatever way the powerful want, unchecked by any kind of framework of the rule of law, which governs how power can and cannot be used. But this whole question of sentencing that's come up lately, on July 11th, the judge will be, after a process that's going to be unfolding in the coming weeks, he will pass sentence on Donald Trump. And people have been talking about, what do you do with a former president if he's convicted of felony crimes? Do you send him to prison? Do you send him to a regular prison? What do you do with the Secret Service, who are, by law, more or less attached to him to prevent anything, any attack on his life? Should it instead be he has to wear an ankle bracelet and be confined to his lavish apartment in Trump Tower or something like that, or Mar-a-Lago, or wherever it is he wants to hang out? And listening to people talk about it, I have felt that reminded of something that happened roughly 50 years ago. That was the other time that we had a president who we knew to be guilty of crimes. He hadn't been tried yet, but Richard Nixon had been forced to resign the presidency because once people heard the tapes, et cetera, and the other evidence that had been brought up in the Watergate hearings, it was clear that he had committed crimes of the sort, that if he didn't resign, he was going to be impeached and removed from office. And soon thereafter, President Ford, Gerald Ford, who had become vice president. He wasn't even elected vice president, but I feel fine about Ford for the most part. He was the last, well, I don't know, I won't say that, but he was an example of the decency in the Republican Party that I had grown up knowing about when decent Dwight Eisenhower was president. I mean, here was another decent Republican after some of the indecencies of the Nixon presidency. But in any event, Ford issued a pardon to Richard Nixon before for anything he had done. Basically, he wasn't going to be held accountable by the by the legal system for any of the crimes he committed. And in the course of making this announcement, Ford uttered the sentence that Nixon has suffered enough. I was upset. I mean, I've got somewhat sophisticated philosophical thoughts about retributive justice and whether and to what extent and under what circumstances is it a good thing for society to make people suffer in punishment of their doing bad things. It's not an easy question, but operating in the American framework, and we have one of the more punitive justice systems compared to other decent, prosperous, liberal democracies around the world. Our prison sentences are longer than other people's. The conditions of prison are certainly worse in the United States than there are in a variety of countries that I know something about, like Norway or something like that. But just given the American way of approaching this question of what does it mean for somebody who's done wrongdoing to suffer, I was offended by the idea that Nixon had suffered enough that we wouldn't want to have him do any time in jail, for example. But then the guy who, let's say maybe a person of color or maybe not a person of color, but somebody who had been dealt a rather difficult hand in life. And there are a lot of Americans who make up a large percentage of the people in the prisons. They're in prison. They're suffering from being in prison. They don't have liberty. They're confined to a cell. They're having to do what they're told and march in line and all the stuff that people have to do in prisons. And they never had any. A lot of them, were dealt a bad hand from the outset. Through no fault of their own, they were born into whatever circumstances they were, and they were trying to make a life that felt okay while having a lot of disadvantages. And then you get to somebody, what do you do with a president that's committed crimes? Richard Nixon, before he was president, he was vice president for 8 years. He gets a really nice house to live in. He's a heartbeat away from the presidency. He gets sent overseas to represent the most powerful and most admired country in the world. And before that, he was Tricky Dick Nixon, who was, got to Congress by running a campaign that people still thought was scandalous when he became president 20 years later. Anyway, he had a law degree. He was educated. He went to college. He got to law school. He was a guy who had a lot of things going for him that most of the people in prison didn't have. But we send the guys that got a bad hand to prison, and the guy who's been one of the most privileged people in the world for many years, at least. About him, we say he's suffered enough. Not even under house arrest. He's just, it's bad enough that he lost the presidency, the most privileged position in the country. Well, I'm sure he did suffer. We've heard about how he was, toward the end, how drunken he was, wandering around the White House drunk and speaking some vile things and talking to pictures on the wall. I think I haven't It's been a while since I heard about that, but I think he was suffering. I don't doubt that he was suffering. And I don't know that the world would be better off. I don't know what the proper thing would have been. But the idea that Nixon had suffered enough when we're talking about the rule of law in a society that takes a lot of really injured people and throws them into very tough circumstances for to spend their years of their lives. That offended me. So now, when I ask myself, well, what kind of punishment is appropriate for Trump, I tend to feel kind of hawkish about it, to tell you the truth. People talk about the fact that he was president, that he is this figure who sat in the most powerful chair of the country, occupying our the most sacred responsibilities the American people can bestow on any human being. That should mean he gets less punishment for abusing that power and committing crimes with it. I don't buy that. I think because he was president, an example should be made of him that, the saying is, those to whom much is given, much shall be required, or something like that. It's a basic moral principle that the people with privilege and advantages, we expect more of. So I don't know what the judge will do. I don't know. Well, obviously, I don't know that. But I don't claim to know what he should do. But I think that the fact that he was president mitigates in the direction of more severe. It matters whether the young man in the ghetto chooses a life of holding up 7-Elevens or something like that. That matters. We don't want to live in a society where things like that happen. The more we can minimize how many stores get subject to armed robbery, the better. We have an image of what kind of society we have, and it's degraded the more we have that kind of crime, muggings and rapes and all that stuff. It matters. If there's if creating an orderly society, this is helped by making people suffer to the extent that it does help to make them suffer. I'm okay with there being punishment. Whatever will serve best to get us the kind of society that we want. But when it comes to the conduct of the people who have been invested with the powers of that impact the whole society, and nowhere are those powers to impact the whole society, for better and for worse, greater than in the Oval Office, there we really have to ask ourselves, what do we do now with Donald Trump or Richard Nixon that will have the biggest impact on preventing the abuse of those powers by people who occupy that office in the future? I don't want the sentencing to be a message of, well, once you've been president, we're going to treat you really with kid gloves. No. Once you've been president, we are going to hold you accountable for using that power for the common good and in upholding your oath of office. And if you violate them, we're going to come down on you hard. That's what I think. And I don't know what the optimal way of sending that message would be. It's not like that's the only thing at stake. I mean, we also have to anticipate, but I don't know at what weight we're going to give it to it. As judge, I would not give weight to how angry the people on the right would be if we dealt with it that way. We are engaged in a battle here in America. And it's not a question of, is there going to be a fight? There is a fight. What those who want to preserve American democracy should do is be good at choosing the battlefield. And the battlefield that says presidents are not above the law. This guy abused his power and should not be supported by any patriotic American. I'm happy to have the battle joined on that, because the truth is on our side. The truth is on the side that Trump is a criminal. That's simply true. And the truth is on our side that a society where a president can violate the law with impunity, as he's been claiming, that is a fascist society. And we know that what our founders gave us creates a better society than the fascistic order, because we've looked at what fascistic orders do. We've seen what happened in Germany in the 30s and the 40s. We've seen what happened in Russia as Putin has established his fascistic dictatorship, and so on. We need to fight and win a battle to preserve the rule of law against criminality, and particularly criminality at the very top of the power system, where law doesn't have anything to do with holding the powerful accountable. It's just a weapon in the hands of the powerful, which is what Trump is advertising that he would turn the law into. He complains that he's being politically prosecuted at the same time as he's promising he's going to bring political prosecutions if he's given the presidency again. Let's fight that battle. The American people need to be shown what's at stake. What are the two sides? The Republicans who went up to talk about how this was a sham and it was a disgraceful day, they were the disgraces, and that can be shown. Let's have that battle. Thank you.